Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you've been able to get out, do some racing, whatever particular form of motorsports you're doing, or if it's a boat or plane, whatever, you're having some fun. Or at the very least, you're doing something that you enjoy and been able to enjoy that this summer. So today we're going to follow up on Tractive Force in Motorsports, which after I released the first video, there was a video from another channel that tried to go into a little bit more detail about why you might do thrust at the tire a little bit differently to maintain peak torque and gear splits. And while they're not wrong, they're 100% correct. The problem with that particular theory is that's not what's done in motorsports, and it requires you to sacrifice time at peak horsepower for torque. And so the reason I don't agree with it is that if you make more torque at a given RPM, you always make more horsepower. And what I had originally said was that the goal isn't to just make torque. Torque doesn't matter as much. It is truly horsepower, because horsepower is the engine's ability to gain RPM per second. So ultimately, we have to have both. I think that was a point that may have been missed. Maybe not. Maybe that's my impression of what came after I made that post. So, in video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of break down a little bit more practical application from this photo while we were at Indy, showing some gains. And while I didn't have working data logs, and somebody had questioned me about how did I know what I was doing, I can kind of show you how I knew what I was doing. Because fortunately I'm smarter than the average bear, so I did some stuff with my dash to make it work since I couldn't figure out the data logging. Going back real fast though to torque versus horsepower, it is the both together. However, you will never hear somebody at an OE level talk about horsepower management. You will never hear anybody in transmission tuning talk about horsepower request. The number is always torque. So, like it or not, it's torque. Torque is what spins the world. That's what Archimedes said. So, you don't have to like it, but this is truly how it works. And if you don't want to accept that fact, then okay, that's great. Look for taillights, because that's all I got to tell you. So, while I was there, the data logging didn't work. So how did I know what I did? Well, let's switch real quick to the dash software. Let me show you a neat trick with AM dash design software. If you make a replica, so here, traction control, slip, measure mile an hour. Then I did a second one, traction control, slip, measured mile per hour. But I did an input filter, maximum since reset. As long as I don't power it out, I have that value. Okay, so circumstantial evidence. I agree that it's not a data log. You just kind of have to go with me on this one. I saw a 5 here out of the corner of my eye. I had a 5.3. It's 5%, 5.2%, something like that. Anyway, that gives us some numbers to work with. That's the important part. This here, this is all me populating it just to make it look cool for what we're doing. Again, circumstantial evidence, but trust me, I know what I saw. I didn't get a picture of it. Next event, we're going to be better about it. I got the data logging working again. But the point is, it establishes something that I needed to know for that gear. Now, I did put the 14 pounds of boost in, the 14 pounds over here, actual versus target. Again, I filled some numbers in. We're going to get to what the actual target was in a second, what that power had done on the dyno, and how I'm going to come up with the numbers that we're going to come up with here in just a second. So now let's switch real fast to the dyno sheet, which is right here. So 12.354 psi. The car did 597. It did 419 foot-pounds. Okay, great. We have a value. We have a torque value. It's not flat. This is also true. It was a low gear. I didn't want it to be flat. That wasn't necessarily my goal for the second or third pass. I was going to start feeding the torque in, but it establishes a maximum value between here. Let's say 6,500 is 400 foot-pounds. 77 is 400 foot-pounds. It gives us a window of, we were over 400 foot-pounds. We know that. We peaked out at 419. So that gives us the ability to do some math. Now, again, circumstantial evidence. We're going to be better with logs next time. But if we go to the software, here was the target in second gear. 170 kPa to 180 kPa. That same 12 pounds, more or less. Did it overshoot? Maybe. Did it undershoot? Maybe. I just have a maximum slip value. At some point was 5.3 miles an hour. I know I saw a 5 because I was looking in second specifically, because I have lots of time to think about it. And by lots of time, maybe a second. But at any rate, I have enough time to pay attention. I don't have to look at the wheel at 70 miles an hour to look down, see what I saw for a slip value. It may have been a little higher. It may have been a little less. But I know what the peak mile an hour slip was. It was 5.3. So we know that. Great. So now let's do some math real quick. If I made this peak number, the 419, and it held flat, again, that was from the 12.3 psi. My second gear ratio Sunday morning was 2.478 to 1 because I had put the stock transmission back in. That gives me, before the final drive, 1,038 foot-pounds, a little bit of change. That 1,038.28 foot-pounds times the final drive, which is 3.285, ends up being 3,410, almost 3,411. Now, when you do the math, I saw a 5.0, I saw a 5.3 on my maximum recorded. I came up with 5% plus or minus. We do some math, I get 3240. So, that's a significant increase. The nominal at Indy before, and this is 2007, or 2017 rather, was 2,850. So the point of this video is actually not to talk about who's right, who's wrong, but how did I pick up 390 foot-pounds worth of tractive force while I was there? So let's talk about what we did with the car. We're going to have some pictures that are going to show up randomly as I'm talking, possibly at the end. But we all know that I put the big weight plate in. I added an extra weight plate under the turbo. That was 160 pounds. 102 and 58 to be precise for the 160. I had 970 pounds of weight on each front tire. I have a split of 76 something percent, 76.5% front. The tires I switched to were not the Pro Bracket radial that I've been running. I went to the Pro Drag radial. The Pro Drag radial is a soft compound and a narrower tread width. It's 8.5 inches instead of 10. So I had more pressure per square inch than I've ever had. I also fixed a problem that I had had before in the back, where I had inadvertently put stiffer springs in the back instead of softer springs. So I got back down to 300-pound springs in the back of the car instead of 650s. And between that, the corner balance, the alignment, maybe the track was just a little bit better that day. All of a sudden, I'm putting down an extra 390 foot-pounds to the surface. So when we go to this was the target. And if you've watched any of the videos of the car on the dyno, you know that this car was very, very close on target, even with a 4-port. I had the PIDs dialed. There's quite a few things that were working very well. And at that lowest speed, I'm not going to have much of a ram air effect. So while I do have the trim to boost target kind of neutered, I'd rather have it at high. I know that it was probably no less than this. It's never had a problem hitting the target before. It's clean air. It's not on a dyno. It's moving right along. So I have every reason to suspect I was making all of this torque, the 419. Maybe I was making more. I would like to hope I was making more, but we know some minimums, so we can extrapolate based on what the dash was doing. Because that's the nice thing about a programmable dash. If you know how to use the software, and maybe I'll need to do a video about that, you can actually do quite a lot to get data from the dash without even logging. Ideally, we always want to log, because to me, a log is concrete. I'm not going to do a busy here and claim that I did 230 and a half spinning 4 gears on 20s with an 800 horse car, because we know that's not how that works. We know that it takes 2200 horsepower in a GTR to run 230. It was very easy to watch at Indy with the Kennedy Racing Red Zilla, the red GTR. It takes 22 to 2400 horse to run 231. It's just what it takes. That car's on big tires, makes a lot of power, and it's indisputable. And while we're not talking about that, we are talking about some data that is, subject to debate, but at 161 miles an hour peak, really, everybody knows I wasn't going that fast. It shows, though, this is my peak slip, 5.3 miles an hour. So the chassis work was working. We increased mechanical grip in the car by properly corner balancing, shifting the weight bias way forward, which there was a lot of wags that said, oh, the car is going to handle horrible. It's a straight line car. We don't care how it handles, as long as it does what it's supposed to do and go in a straight line. And it did it very, very well. Now, to put this into perspective, and this is where it's going to get almost unbelievable, these numbers are very, very close to what we're going to see on a B Series car at the track. 3,300 pound-feet. I always say pound-feet. I used to get in trouble for saying foot-pounds. 3,300 pound-feet of torque at the axle on a 24.5 on a prep track, plus or minus for the day. I don't have the weight bias for that car, but that particular chassis, that's what it was doing. So proper setup, proper chassis development, you can stick a bunch of torque to the track. Now, whether we add all-wheel drive, and maybe these numbers are up over 5,000, 6,000, or 7,000 pound-feet total because of weight transfer to the back axle, the weight of the vehicle, because weight on the axle is ultimately what is going to establish tractive force. This is why trains aren't made out of titanium. They're made out of solid iron, steel. That is how we develop the traction at the ground, what in locomotives they call tractive force. And honestly, it's the proper term. So whether it's a locomotive or a race car, kind of gives you an idea. This is how we come up with these numbers. Now, it's all circumstantial. I'm not going to hide behind anything. We can look at these numbers and you can say, oh yeah, that's where he was. And it's my word against anybody's. So we're just going to kind of let that particular part lie. But I know that it definitely hooked more than it ever has. So I'm really looking forward to the next event. We're going to try very hard to be in Texas, where the surface is supposedly as good as Colorado. It's 3,000 feet. It's a 7,600 foot airstrip. We're really looking forward to doing some crazy stuff and actually having data logs. So anyway, guys, I hope this finds you well. If you like this content, please consider subscribing if you haven't. If you know somebody that might be interested in the more technical side, we're going to kind of start from the beginning sooner or later. I realize I've started in the middle or towards the end for a lot of people, but we're going to kind of start a little bit more how to tune. Consider sharing it with a friend. If you want notifications as new content is added, hit the bell icon. And I need to give a shout out to our friends at HP Academy. Honestly, if you want to learn how to tune and you don't want to do it the hard way, Andre and crew do a lot for the community with their courses. You will learn a lot in how to wire, how to chassis setup, how to build an engine, how to tune. So consider them if you want to learn. I get asked that question frequently. Where did I go to school? I didn't. Not to learn this anyway. I'm going to say the School of Hard Knocks, but you don't have to go to the School of Hard Knocks. You can get proper education. My channel is not necessarily about teaching you how to do this. It's more a gateway drug to get you hooked on how to tune and find the right guys to teach you, to show you some advanced stuff that maybe you are not going to know. So I'm not here to replace anybody. HP Academy is where I would go. Maybe after that, Evans Tuning, I guess, if they're still doing something. There's a lot on YouTube. But HP Academy is where I would start, guys. I think that there's a lot you can learn. I know there's a lot you can learn. Andre's been fast for a long time. So anyway, take care. Have fun. Go do some racing. And we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.